Hello and welcome back to the Tears Collective. Today we're going to be playing some more World of Warships. In particular, we're going to be looking at the relatively new British tech tree line. Now, I've always been partial to the British tree ships, and I was kind of outraged when the Soviets were made into the game before the Royal Navy. I can understand why. I mean, it's wargaming, it's where they're based kind of thing, but really, I'm glad they're in. That's what counts now. At this point, we only really have access to the cruiser line and three premiums: a cruiser, a destroyer, and a battleship. The premiums are actually some of the most iconic ships to have ever carried the Union Jack ensign. I'm excited to try and play a few of them. However, let's have a look at the British line. What makes them so different from the cruisers in particular, from the others in the rest of the game? Well, the first one you're always going to find, and it's going to be the main... It's not necessarily a drawback. It's difficult to describe as a drawback. You can only use armor-piercing rounds. You do not have HE. Only the three premiums have HE rounds. So, on one hand, you obliterate other cruisers. It's kind of ridiculous how quickly you can kill, a Karlsruhe, for example. But you don't have HE. You can't burn everyone. And you have to get... used to the idea of having a lot of deflections and a lot of over-penetrations ridiculously, annoyingly quickly. I found I've had issues with destroyers in the ship, as they tend not to, they don't have citadel to penetrate. They have practically no armor worth mentioning, and I can fire an entire volley at a destroyer and it will go right through. Every single hit will over-penetrate. It'll do relatively minor damage. It does damage. It still wrecks stuff, but doesn't destroy things. As it would on a cruiser. In the meantime, that destroyer has a chance to spam HE and torps at you, so you gotta use the maneuverability, which frankly is very good in most of the ships that I've been playing. They are very maneuverable, very quick turning circle for the most part. I can dodge, almost not quite as well as say a destroyer might be able to, but I can dodge definitely much better than the German cruiser line. Another interesting part of the British cruiser line is that their torpedoes are kind of special. Similar to how the German destroyers have a unique layout and how they fire their torpedoes, the British cruiser line has two settings. One is fire by emplacement, and the other one is single fire. Fire by emplacement basically means it's the same way that the US and the Japanese ones do. We can fire all the torpedoes in one launcher or emplacement, in one volley fired in one direction. Pretty standard. Usually with the US and the Japanese ones, you can do a full spread one, which lets you basically spread out the torpedo shots. Instead, with the British ones, you have the single fire, which lets you shoot a single torpedo from any given emplacement on your ship that's loaded. How is this effective? I mean, you're just firing one torpedo, so it doesn't really help that much. Well, imagine this scenario. If you're sitting next to an island, and you know a battleship or something is coming on the other side, and you kind of know when he's going to be coming through. What if you just fire all your torpedoes in one big grouping? Like one little 10 to 20 meter spray volley of, say, 8 torpedoes if you've got 8 torpedoes. That's 8 torpedoes that can hit a target and, frankly, will most likely obliterate anything similar tier or lower. Some of the British cruiser torpedoes are very, very strong. Alright, and now let's have a look at the premiums. We have the HMS Belfast, which is a tier 7 cruiser, the tier 6 battleship, the Warspite, and the tier 3 HMS Campbeltown destroyer. These ships have had some of the most varied and diverse service records in the Royal Navy, especially the Warspite. The grand old lady, as she is called, she actually fought at the Battle of Jutland during World War I, which is one of the most iconic sea battles during the war, and she fought through the majority of World War II. She did plenty of service in the Mediterranean and such like that. But out of the whole trio, one of them really sticks out as being the most incredible. At tier 3 is the HMS Campbeltown, destroyer and all-round badass in the history department. Originally one of the ships that was provided to the UK by the US via the destroyers for bases deal. She was relatively out of date at the time. She was just kind of garbage. But the UK needed destroyers for escort service, and they didn't exactly have many choices in the matter. They really needed them for escorting their merchant fleets across the ocean. The German U-boats were really hammering them by then, so they really needed them. But what makes it so special when there are literally 50 other destroyers that are practically the same as her hanging about? She took part in one of the most audacious commando raids in World War II. And by the considerable audacity of commando raids in general, it's pretty staggering. Operation Chariot was the ambitious attack on the massive dry dock Normandy in the city of Saint-Nazaire. And it was carried on the 28th of March, 1942. The dry dock was originally built for the SS Normandy, which was one of the largest ocean liners in the world at the time. It was considered a rival of the Queen Mary, which in itself was a massive ship. The reason for the attack was simple. The German heavy cruisers and battle cruisers like the Tirpitz and the Bismarck were menacing the merchant fleets and destroying convoys over the Atlantic and in the Channel, or entering the Channel. By destroying the dry dock, these massive ships would have to return to home waters to repair in Kiel or other areas in the north of Germany where they were originally built. But the issue is, otherwise, if the dry dock was available, they'd be able to go to Saint-Nazaire, which is just on the French Atlantic coast, so they'd be back into service immediately. They wouldn't have to drive down the channel where they'd be open to bombing runs and attacks and all sorts of things like that. They could just sit in the harbour and repair and be relatively safe. The Bismarck actually was making for Saint-Nazaire after the Battle of the Denmark Strait, where the HMS Hood was sunk and the HMS Prince of Wales was damaged. The Bismarck was sunk before it could reach the safety, but the destination made the Special Operations Command think, maybe we should destroy this dry dock, because it seems to be very important to the continued work of the Kriegsmarine. So, it's a very unusual plan, and I'm just going to try and lay it out as easily as possible. In a flotilla of small motorboats and 2 destroyer escorts, the Campbeltown made it the attack on the dry dock in the early hours of the morning. The advance was wrought with issues like a sandbank which beached the destroyer. In fact, it had stopped twice, but it managed to unbeach itself both times. Once in the harbour main, it came under heavy German artillery fire. Originally, it had German ensigns up. It had signals going out that made it seem like a German destroyer to kind of get it in. But it made most of the way through towards the dry dock area until they figured out that's not a German destroyer. It does not look like anything like we have. Or they had, shall I say. In spite of the numerous injuries and deaths on the ship, the HMS Campbeltown sped up to 19 knots, also known as 35 kilometers per hour, and rammed the primary exterior gate of the dry dock. Yeah, that's right. It rammed the gate. A massive wall of metal and concrete and steel and whatnot. Fantastic. The impact drove the ship 10 meters into the gate. It managed to survive, stuck in the middle of the gate due to the heavy armor plating bolted to the exterior before leaving its original dock. This alteration, along with removing most of the weaponry, majority of it, like her turrets and her depth charge launchers, allowed for the addition of 4.5 tons of explosives seated in concrete in the bow. Originally, the explosives were supposed to be set off after 2 hours, as a part of the cover for the escape, but due to a faulty delayed fuse, they didn't go off until noon that day. Seems kind of odd, right? However, the destroyer went off while it was being inspected by dozens of high-ranking German officers and numerous dock workers and soldiers. In all, the explosion killed 360 men, and the dry dock was put out of action for the rest of the war. Along with the heroic fighting of the commandos on the docks and other areas in Saint-Nazaire, the attack was a resounding success, but only 228 of the 622 men made it back to England. Most of them were captured, 169 were killed, and 5 made it to neutral Spain and finally got back to Britain after a long voyage at sea. 89 decorations were awarded for this raid, which is a staggering amount for just 622 men. 89 of them were decorated in some fashion or form. including 5 Victoria Crosses, which is the highest award for gallantry in the military, British military. These are not handed out on a whim. And there have been stories where people have not received them in spite of it seeming obvious, like, wow, how could he not get one? But it has to be particularly amazing. And it speaks volumes for the fighting and the heroism displayed during this fight because so many were handed out. One of the Victoria Crosses was awarded to Lieutenant Commander Stephen Beattie, the commanding officer of the HMS Campbeltown. It's a remarkable, remarkable ship, and I really need to buy it whenever I get an opportunity to. In-game, it's not remarkable in too many ways. It seems very quick, but I haven't bought it, I haven't tried it out yet, so take that with a grain of salt. Alright, thank you very much for watching, guys. I do appreciate it, and I will see you on the next video. If you have enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the like or subscribe button. It really helps the channel. Thank you very much for watching.